War with China. Are you ready? This is no longer a theory or speculation. The United States is preparing for war with China. This is not a theoretical statement, not even a routine statement. This is a very concrete step that was decided at a recent meeting of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff. Based on the conclusions of U.S. intelligence about China's intentions, every 50 to 70 years the population of the world, starting from the moment Moses came down from the mountain, which was about 3,500 years ago, enters into a major military conflict, which we have recently started calling world wars. The beginning of the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century. By the way, we've already passed the point when another bloody massacre should have started. Well, that doesn't mean it will never start again. It just means that the scale might be much broader. Because, when it swings and gets stuck there and when it lets go, it will hit so hard you'll really feel it. Have you noticed how anti-Semitism is growing? Have you noticed how tensions are rising between those who are willing to work hard to earn a living and those who want to take it away? Have you noticed how young people from third countries, like during the Crusades, have flooded into the countries of those they envy? You might say that everything is different. But everything that looks and seems different is actually still the same at its core. Too many young people, an enormous amount of energy. It's upsetting that someone else has something I don't. After all, I'm a good person, I deserve it too. And there's always someone ready to strike a match to set it all on fire. And it will definitely catch fire, ladies and gentlemen. It will definitely catch fire. Murphy's Law, remember? A sandwich always falls butter side down. And if it falls butter side up, try again. If something bad can happen, it will definitely happen. And my mom used to add to that, it will definitely happen to you. And unfortunately, she was right too. Unfortunately, and unfortunately, always. The U.S. intelligence community believes that China is preparing to attack Taiwan sometime between 2027 and 2030. And most likely the actual strike will happen after Trump leaves the White House in 2029. That means we should expect this to happen sometime in the second half of 2029. Of course, America is not sitting idly by in this regard. They have decided to develop a number of weapons that will be able to strike Chinese targets before China can detect the attacker, or with such a range that China won't be able to fire back, of course, using conventional weapons. But right now, this is a new generation of weapons that will make it impossible for Chinese planes to take off safely. Chinese submarines won't be able to surface safely, and Chinese ships will be destroyed from a distance at which China itself won't be able to reach us. Details in just a couple of minutes. Another extremely important topic that we've come to over the past few days, we really hoped it wouldn't come to this, but it looks like it has. Remember, I told you that the Iranians thought they could hold out until November. They miscalculated. Their leverage worked more or less until, around June 15. After that, when we realized that the plan we had carefully prepared for internal matters, of course, had failed, we went with Plan B, and it's much tougher for Iran than what we had previously anticipated and hoped for. The Iranians, either because of their own internal problems or simply because of some nonsense, just can't capitulate for reasons of their own, right? They convince themselves, or pretend to be convinced, that they won the war. And now they're holding the whole world by the throat and trying to dictate terms to the United States. Well, but that doesn't work with Trump. That's not how things are done with him. That's why additional ships are already heading toward the Persian Gulf. That's why new reinforcements are being sent to the CENTCOM commander. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has just conducted an aerial tour of the region. And Israel, according to Netanyahu's own statement, has been placed on high alert. Something is clearly driving the Iranian leadership into a state of growing panic. Especially since in the coming days they are planning a lavish funeral for their Supreme Commander-in-Chief, who was killed by the Americans. I will tell you all about this in detail and in order. But first we will start with China, about weapons against China. And that's why the Chinese leadership right now is also in a state similar to Iran's. It's called panic. panic, Iranian style. To put it in street language, the Chinese leadership's pants are full of brown, unpleasant-smelling, runny stuff, or rather a liquid, runny substance. So, on the global South front, there are serious changes. The wind is blowing right in the faces of the narrow-eyed. Their mothers forgot to tell them as kids that if you spit against the wind, that spit usually ends up right on your own face. On June 9th, U.S. Air Force Command in the Pacific made a statement that was a rude awakening for Beijing. For the first time in history, it was publicly confirmed that the strategic stealth bomber B-2 Spirit, well, B-2 Spirit, yes, it is capable of carrying and actually using a long-range anti-ship missile. The missile is called the AGM-158C. This number doesn't mean anything to us. Ladies and gentlemen, you would read this and just pass by, simply because, well, we're not specialists. And for non-specialists, this statement doesn't mean anything. And 2 days earlier, on June 27, during large-scale exercises, I think they're called Valiant Shield, something like that near the Mariana Islands. Mariinsky is a theater, Mariana are islands, north of Guam. So the B-2 really did launch such a missile, and with one of the first hits, it struck a decommissioned landing ship, that is the USS Juno, an old ship from the times of Vietnam and Desert Storm. The target was finished off by a Japanese submarine. So, with a heavy torpedo, with support from fighters from the aircraft carrier George Washington, I hope you understand the symbolism of the fact that the Americans blew it up from afar, and the Japanese finished it off up close. Before these two incidents, first it happened and then it was announced, but no one mentioned it in open sources, and that's why I didn't know that the B-2 even had such a capability. The integration of the missile was kept secret. Why is this fundamentally important? Regular fighters, like the F-16 or F-18, have what's called a radar signature. They can be seen on radar screens long before they approach. But the B-2 is almost invisible. That's why it's called a stealth bomber, right? It is nearly invisible to radars and, according to various estimates, can carry up to a dozen of these missiles at the same time. It launches them from a safe distance for us, remaining undetected, even in heavily defended enemy airspace. The missile itself has quite an impressive range, 200 nautical miles. And according to some estimates, up to 500 nautical miles. Well, that's about 900 kilometers. 900 kilometers. This turns the bomber, which for decades was primarily associated with strikes against ground targets and the nuclear arsenal, an open platform capable of sinking Chinese aircraft carriers and large landing ships. I want you to remember those aircraft carriers. That is exactly what the Chinese Navy has been most proud of lately, having increased to 370 large ships. By 2030, they plan to have 430 ships in total. 35 of them are warships, while the U.S. currently has about, 291, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So, with what America currently has, strengthening the Chinese Navy becomes, almost pointless. Completely pointless, but I said almost just in case. It's kind of like drones entering infantry battles. And a 1,000-year history of infantry was turned into an absolutely pointless battle of dung beetles. This weapon also completely changes the concept of the huge aircraft carrier, which used to carry fantastic military power. The Americans came up with all this once. They made it, yes. But when others started using it, we had already come up with something else. And now there's this aircraft carrier, or a battleship carrier, I don't know, whatever else they have there. A destroyer, and suddenly missiles are flying at it from 3 or 4 directions, and the aircraft carrier hasn't even detected the plane. Those are the ones the missiles are being launched from. It doesn't even know it's being fired at yet, but it's already done for. But that's not all. At the same time, the U.S. is developing a discrete air-launched missile with a range of over 1,000 nautical miles. That's more than 1,800 kilometers. For comparison, the current standard missiles, like the ones China has, for example, they can reach a distance that's about 10 times shorter. Gentlemen, 10 times shorter. The closed presentation for defense contractors is classified and scheduled for late August at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and of course, spies from all over the world will rush there. The purpose of the development is extremely simple and extremely ruthless. American aircraft will be able to shoot down Chinese refueling planes. Well, like long-range radar detection aircraft and other critically important high-value targets. At a distance where Chinese fighters are physically not ready and can't reach them, they're unable to reach them. Well, I don't know, just imagine like a sniper against infantry, right? Only not on the ground, but somewhere up high in the sky, hundreds of kilometers away from the line of contact. So basically, there are 36 snipers sitting there, right? In a zone where the enemy can't reach them. And calmly, methodically, they destroy everything that moves. Anything that moves, stands, jumps, or digs in. At the same time, it's important to understand that Guam and bases on the American mainland remain within the range of Chinese ballistic and cruise missiles. No one has canceled that. Well, China simply won't be able to shoot down American planes that operate at such an extreme distance, and that means the initiative in the air passes to the U.S. And what does air superiority mean? We've already seen this in Iran. I want to say that Israel played a huge role in these two modern ways of destroying enemy forces. This situation is alarming for Beijing. Over the past month or month and a half, the Japanese self-defense forces have already scrambled fighter jets several times to intercept Chinese aircraft over the East China Sea. Both Chinese and Russian aircraft regularly test the Japanese and Taiwanese air defense identification zones, testing the reaction for resilience. And here it's important to speak honestly. Without exaggeration, U.S. intelligence itself does not call 2027 a guaranteed fixed date for an invasion. Well, we've already talked about the fact that it's most likely 2029. We're talking about the so-called Davidson Line. The timeline was named back in 2021 by Admiral Phil Davidson as a benchmark for China's combat readiness, not as a declared D-Day. Even the latest annual threat assessment by the American intelligence community states directly that the Chinese leadership does not have a fixed timetable for reunification by force, and the seizure of Taiwan itself is seen by Beijing as an extremely risky and technically complex operation. But almost all serious analysts, from the Pentagon to independent think tanks, agree on one thing. The real window of increased risk is specifically between 2027 and 2030, since at that moment, according to calculations, the capabilities of the Chinese Navy and Air Force should reach their peak. That is why the Pentagon is in a hurry to test and demonstrate new weapons right now, rather than waiting until time really starts to run out. As you can see, joint research and cooperation between Israel and the United States help keep our country a leader in global weaponry. Let me remind you of my promise from the start. What we're about to find out about Iran right now is much more interesting, amusing, funny, and tragic than everything I just told you about China. And stay until the end, because there's a special bonus waiting for you there. I'll tell you how conservative bloggers have finally started a real open war against the stream of lies that's been pouring out for years. Whether it's from sources paid by Russian interests or from organizations that are declining, some of which are connected to Soros, or simply from blatantly unscrupulous political figures like Tripam, such as Khabarovskaya, yes, Tripamondrov, let's put it that way, and Tripamondrov. Broadcasting in Russian, I promise it will be interesting. So Iran, panic underground, above ground, and underwater. To the main point, gentlemen. The situation has reached that very point we've been talking about for the past few days in a row. What is it that currently frightens the Iranian leadership so much? In the coming days, from July 4 to 9, Iran will hold grand state funerals for the supreme leader, that is, the commander-in-chief and so on, and Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed by an American-Israeli strike back on February 2080, on the very first day of the war. The authorities expect to gather several 100,000 or possibly even millions of mourners. The ceremonies will be spread across several cities at once. There's Tehran, the holy city of Qom, Mashhad, I think, Najaf, and Karbala, so in several cities where Shia pilgrims have been coming for centuries. And this is where things get really interesting. On all the roads leading to the sites where enriched uranium is stored, ambushes and additional checkpoints have been set up. That is the Iranian military command. Apparently, they are seriously concerned that the moment of national mourning and the largest concentration of people could become a convenient window for a ground operation by the enemy. Well, who is the enemy? That means us, the Israelis, right? To seize their nuclear stockpiles, by force accordingly. The formal successor to Khamenei, his own son, Mojtaba, has not appeared in public even once since his appointment as supreme leader. No one from the outside knows for sure if he's even alive. Maybe he's, I don't know, maybe he's wounded, maybe he's unconscious, maybe he's not even there at all. And this has already given rise to a lot of rumors and dark humor within Iranian society. Whether he will personally appear at his father's funeral is a big open question. Logic suggests that the top officials of the country, including the highest military command and leadership, will most likely send stand-ins or deputies or limit themselves to video messages rather than risk physically gathering in one place and coming under a possible strike from the US or Israel. There have been more than enough precedents of targeted eliminations of top leadership in recent months to discourage any desire to take risks. And now about Uranus. Because this is exactly where the real crux of the whole story lies. Or, as Gorbachev used to say, this is where the dog has dug. According to the head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, about 440 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%, which is literally one step away from weapons grade, that is 90%, is presumably still located in the tunnel complex in Isfahan. Judging by high-resolution satellite images, the cargo was probably moved there as early as June 9th, 2025, just a few days before the start of the Israeli strikes. In the footage, you can see a truck with 18 hermetically sealed containers at the southern entrance to the tunnel. The IAEA has had no access to this facility for almost a year. Iran officially ceased all verification activities under the Safeguards Agreement as of February 28, 2026. They turned off the surveillance cameras and completely removed the seals from all declared facilities. According to the agency's own wording, this is the most serious monitoring failure in the entire history of oversight of Iran's nuclear program. It's as if they're being completely naive, as if Iran has never deceived anyone in its life, and that's why they did everything up there. The fact that they quietly continued doing things in several other underground locations, we simply have no idea about that. Officially, Iran claims that both the tunnel complex itself and the new enrichment facility built there were subjected to illegal military actions. This happened during last year's strikes, but the IAEA simply cannot confirm or deny this physically, since there was no access to the facility before, and there still isn't. To give you a sense of the scale, 440 kilograms of uranium. It is enriched to 60%. With further enrichment, theoretically, that's enough for about 10 nuclear warheads. Some even say 12. According to analysts, if Iran decides to take this step, it will take about 12 weeks or 3 months to bring the material to weapons-grade purity. At the same time, the extent of actual damage inside the tunnel complex under the mountain in Isfahan remains completely unknown to us. But they know it, right? So here's the main question. Will the Persians themselves be able to even roughly guess where exactly and how the Israelis and Americans might strike this facility and how to defend against it? Judging by the hastily set up ambushes and roadblocks, the Iranians are clearly not confident in their answer to this question. I wouldn't advise them to be too confident either. Although it would seem they had almost 4 months since the death of Khamenei to calmly think through and properly organize the defense of these key points, but apparently they couldn't give a clear answer to this question either then or now. Because, well, only God knows what the Israelis might do. At the same time, armed confrontations with the Kurds in the northwest of the country are sharply escalating. In the past few days, the clashes have noticeably intensified, well, just much more than usual. On June 29th and 30th, according to the human rights organization KHNGO, At least 5 fighters of the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan were killed. They died in a battle near the village of Kaskapan, close to the city of Paranshah. Meanwhile, the Fars news agency, which is close to the IRGC, claimed that 6 Kurdish militants were killed. Well, someone is lying. Yes, 6, 5. There's a huge difference. 4 more fighters from the armed wing of the PJAK party, I think that's what it's called, were killed in separate clashes right after 2 IRGC soldiers were shot dead in their own home. At the same time, drones continue to systematically strike the camps of the Iranian Kurdish opposition already on the territory of Iraqi Kurdistan. Another strike during those same days hit a camp near the city of Kohe Koya, east of Erbil. Turkey, meanwhile, is watching the unfolding events with barely concealed anxiety. If the Kurds, with the support of the U.S. and, according to some reports, the CIA, manage to gain a foothold on even a small piece of Iranian territory and hold it, this will inevitably fuel the ambitions of Turkish Kurds, the very same ones who, in my opinion, will be seeking autonomy in Syria. And already on the territory of Turkey itself, with whom Ankara has only just, and with great difficulty, reached an agreement on the disarmament of the PKK. And inside Iran itself, according to available data, ordinary people are increasingly moving from protest to direct sabotage against IRGC structures. That is, public discontent is now spilling over not only in the form of street demonstrations, but also in targeted attacks on local authorities. So what does Trump think about this? Public comments are rather fragmentary. He confirmed to journalists that it was very tough for 3 nights in a row, referring to the recent exchange of strikes, but almost immediately shifted the focus to completely different topics. He started talking about new factories, investments, and the development of infrastructure for artificial intelligence, clearly avoiding a direct answer to the question about readiness to resume full-scale military actions against Iran. At the same time, in practice, airstrikes on Iranian opposition targets in Iraq continue, and over the Strait of Hormuz, American planes, refueling aircraft, and long-range radar detection planes are constantly present, covering the fighters in the air. That is, the strait still remains an area of extremely high tension, even with the formal ceasefire in effect. I'm putting the whole picture together. On one hand, the Iranian leadership is displaying marked confidence and trying to dictate terms as if they are the victors in this war. On the other hand, they are hiding their enriched uranium deep underground, hastily setting up ambushes on the roads in anticipation of a possible enemy raid, clearly fearing their own nervous funerals. The supreme leader is visibly losing control over entire Kurdish provinces in the northwest of the country. This is absolutely not what a victorious country that has actually won a war looks like. This looks much more like the behavior of a country desperately trying to buy time by any means possible, while it still physically can. The situation of the Iranian leadership is close to desperate. Inflation is already over 70. The people are already on the verge of hunger riots. The Kurds, armed resistance groups, the Americans, Israeli airstrikes. Strangely enough, the problem is that they can't surrender, the Iranians, because as soon as they surrender, their own citizens will hang them on the nearest trees. They might not even make it to the trees. That's why the only way for them to survive is to wait it out. Maybe they'll manage to outlast it, hide in a hole and growl from there, and pretend that they can bite anyone who comes close. The only thing they can do today is threaten in every possible way. Who? The civilian population, the economy, just the normal life of all humanity. Just imagine for a second that in this situation, the mullahs, ayatollahs, liberals, I don't care what they're called, yes, the Iranian ones, have an atomic bomb. I would be very interested to know what you think about this. How do you imagine it, gentlemen? They would say, no, we would never do such a horrible thing to humanity and would never drop an atomic bomb. Or would they, without a moment's hesitation, drop it? On Israel, the Persian Gulf, anywhere. So, in other words, are they ready to cause enormous, irreparable harm to planet Earth or not? Write your thoughts. It's always interesting to know your opinion. By the way, don't just write. Don't just write, give your reasoning. That's when it gets interesting. Otherwise, it's just, yes, no, no, give your reasoning. Okay. Now we're moving on to a video by Yuri Tabak, also known as Yuri Georgi Tabak, from the Don Quixote series. Let's start with the introduction. The introduction is given not even from Don Quixote himself, but from a photo of Don Quixote. Or even better, right? Actually, the photo, this very photo, decided to take on a little liar named Maxime, last name Katz. Now you're going to enjoy this, or at the very least, you'll be amused.
Hello everyone, the photo of Don Quixote here.
And today I want to talk about how the millionaire blogger Maxim Katz shamelessly manipulates information, fools, and deceives his subscribers. There are plenty of examples of this. Let's go through some of them as a teaser.
So we're invited to listen to what Maxim, nicknamed Katz, tells his, well, judging by what he writes, multi-million audience.
If Trump's policies are enacted as stated, it could trigger a global recession and reduce worldwide demand for everything.
So Maxime made a statement that if we act according to the economic model proposed by Trump, a global recession will occur, and global demand for everything will plummet. Nightmare. The standard of living has plummeted. After that, they show us charts where you can see that after adopting the model proposed by Trump, global demand really took off. Well, I mean, it went in a different direction. It shot up. So, in other words, Maxim said that Ivanov won at soccer, but in reality, Rabinovich lost at Proferat. So it's almost the same thing, but not quite. Photo of Don Quixote. And along with him, Gary Yuri Tabak gently hints to us that Maxim, nicknamed Katz, is actually not Katz, but Potts. Let's move on.
The only thing that can be said more or less definitively is that Trump will pursue a policy of isolationism. But what about the others? Trump likely flew to the island and joined in everything.
Here it got personal. So that Putz Cat says that I'm eating a cheese sandwich, but in reality I'm eating a sausage sandwich. No one understands why he's lying. That's just what he wants. You don't want to deceive, but you still want to lie? The whole world already knows that Trump had nothing to do with it. And moreover, he was the only person who went to the authorities and offered to give them information about Epstein's shameful and vile activities. That's why Epstein hated him. The whole world already knows this. But why does Katsu want to keep saying things that everyone knows are completely untrue? I don't know. But there is an answer someone suggested. He does it because he's Potts, not Katsu. Or maybe he's both Katsu and Potts at the same time.
Flight logs and FBI documents have long ago clearly confirmed the fact that Trump never flew to Epstein's island.
Nothing. The only thing I can say about President Trump is that he was the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas to many people, or at least notified some pretty influential people that I was going to, that I wanted to talk to them, he was the only one who picked up the phone and said, "Let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you everything you need to know." And he was very helpful with the information he provided, and he never showed any sign of being involved in anything shady, but he had good information that was confirmed, and it helped us, and we didn't have to take his testimony. That was in 2009. So, do you know if there's any truth to James Patterson's claims that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago? I definitely heard that, Mark. I definitely heard that. Not sure if it was Trump or the manager. Yes, Trump. But I heard a rumor that Epstein was kicked out of there because he allegedly tried to pick up someone's daughter.
And also Trump kicked Epstein out of his club. Golf club, right? Golf club. Because he tried to pick up, as the prosecutor said, a young girl and persuade her to work for him as a prostitute. But Katz doesn't understand either English or Russian, so he didn't hear that. He only speaks Japanese and Nizhny Tagil dialect. He, Katz, is deaf and mute. And it seems like the million people subscribed to him are either fake or idiots.
Trump's chaotic behavior is making more and more people think that the president is losing his mind. And America, traumatized by Joe Biden's experience, has a more specific opinion that Trump has dementia.
Fake news and manipulations by leftist media and useful idiots about Trump's mental health. I have already successfully debunked this in my video, Degradation Against the Background of Trump Derangement Syndrome, Part 2. I highly recommend watching it. But for the information of Katz and other Solonins who are straining and puffing, trying their best to attribute dementia to Trump, Trump recently passed a test for it. And not the slightest sign of anything unhealthy was found in him. An honest blogger would definitely include this news in one of his videos to achieve objectivity. But our episode is about Maxim Katz, not about an honest blogger.
I conducted a very small and very unscientific survey on my channel where I asked my viewers one question. A. Is Katz an idiot? B. Is Katz a complete idiot? And is Katz a useful idiot? And now I'm ready to share the results of this question with you. So the answer is, Maxim Katz is an idiot. 7% Maxim Katz is a complete idiot. 11.4% and Maxim Katz is a useful idiot. 92%. Now you might tell me that 92 plus 7 plus 11.4 is more than 100%. Yes, you're right. But when you're dealing with liberals, numbers don't have any meaning or significance. For example, Astrid Lindgren, that famous, well-known Swedish writer, published an open letter to the authorities of her country. After she was forced to pay, the government made her pay 102% of her annual income. So let's not pay attention to the percentages that liberals or Democrats mention, or whatever they're called in Sweden. Let's just say that the idea, well, of Maxik, the useful idiot, won our contest or poll by a wide margin. Congratulations to Maxim on this remarkable achievement. Well, of course, let's say thank you to the portrait of Don Quixote and to Captain Yuri Tabak. That's all. Gentlemen, subscribe to my channel, to my Telegram, so on Telegram it's Leon Weinstein, Leon Weinsteinus, that's how my main channel is spelled. That's what it's called there. I post short comments and reactions there, and also check out Captain Tabaka's channel. See you soon.